Hello. When I made my last video, I had a page up on the screen from The Guardian, like this one. And like this one, it had a very wide margin down the left-hand side. And in that margin was a photo of Owen Jones and a link to a piece he'd written on l'affaire Ferguson, I suppose you might call it, although the word affair here is capable of more than one interpretation. I really wanted to crop that left side of the page just to get rid of that damn silly face. But the problem was that the margin also contained the names of the journalists who'd written the article to which I was referring. It's not on here, but there were somewhere around here, there were three names. Why, I thought, did it take no less than three journalists to write that one very badly referenced article? I rather thought that a newspaper article needed just the one beer-soaked hack to stagger in from a hard day at the pub and write 1,000 words of incisively brilliant prose in about 20 minutes. But obviously I had that wrong. However, I digress. And so I'd better just let you know how I feel about the lockdown business, so you know, sort of my attitude to what's going on. I think it was probably necessary to lock down to start with. The NHS was totally unprepared for that sort of thing. Very little was known about the virus. It was a completely, N quantity. And we'd seen such dreadful images from China and the truly chaotic conditions in Italy. And we knew so little about it at the time, even how it was transmitted, how it killed. We weren't even sure of that. And we certainly had no idea of the therapies that might work. So we had to have some breathing space. I really believe that. I think it would have been worse if the government had done nothing. But then, actually, I think the whole business has sort of developed a life of its own. I certainly don't think the lockdown is a good idea now, although some care still has to be taken, obviously. But the NHS has got its act together. We are developing strategies. And let's face it, the economy can stand only so much. And it really is a false dichotomy, as Owen Jones actually pushes in this article here, that it's a choice between the economy and lives. The virus is going to kill people, and the lockdown is going to kill people. We have to decide which one will wreck the fewest lives, really. But the lockdown makes no sense now, especially since the government left the airports and the seaports open. What the blue blazes were they thinking of doing that? Just within the past couple of days, the government has announced the shutting of the stable door. But that's well after the horse has bolted. Well, not only bolted, it's galloped clean into the next county. And I'm quite certain that they did that only because Nigel Farage has been making such a fuss about it. Meanwhile, the figures for the COVID deaths in London, which is where most of these visitors on their planes and boats would have ended up, they're pretty spectacular. 18,000 people just in the London area alone. But yeah, we should have pulled up the drawbridge a month ago. But Owen Jones doesn't say anything about that, does he? Because immigration, good. Nor does he mention that the nightmare of London, Labour's very own Sadiq Khan disaster area, actually cut the number of underground trains so that rush hour crowds were even more of a crush than usual. I mean, when you get that sort of stuff, you actually start to wonder if the mayor was deliberately trying to kill people, don't you? But Owen Jones doesn't worry about little things like that. No, what he's worried about is the prurient interest. The prurient interest that the right-wing media focus is on Neil Ferguson. Do they hold the government to account over Britain facing the highest death toll in Europe? I'm going to get to that in a minute. Or do they take aim at a government scientist who ignored his own advice to the public and invited a partner to his home? Isn't the wording precious there? He invited a partner to his home. First of all, she wasn't his partner. She is somebody else's partner. But that to one side, well, the bit on the side, what she is to him is his, well, girlfriend. And that's the most charitable word I can think of for her on the spur of the moment. And as for the word invited, he didn't invite her, he sneaked her in. And let's have a look at this highest death toll business. First of all, we have to acknowledge that different countries measure the cause of death in different ways. In Italy, they might have recorded heart disease as the cause of death in a patient who had COVID, where in the UK it might have been registered as COVID rather than heart disease. So that's one thing. It's also completely disingenuous to count the deaths. Italy has 60 million people, the UK 68 million. Obviously, the proportion is going to be higher. Belgium has had only 8,500 deaths the last time I looked. So does that sound good? Oh, then what about the Belgian population? 11.5 million people. Multiply 11.5 million by 6 and you have more or less the population of the United Kingdom. Multiply 8,500 by 6 and you have 51,000. So if you're talking about figures, Belgium outstrips the United Kingdom in proportionate COVID deaths by about 40%. But the left aren't particularly good at maths, are they? Because when it comes to counting dead bodies as a result of socialism, Jones seems particularly weak on that one, while calculating percentages of population caused by an epidemic appears to be completely beyond his abilities. Jones then continues with something rather close to a conspiracy theory, but he does it in a typically slimy, sideways way with the words, "It could be perceived." Let's have a look at this. It could be perceived as a retaliatory hit by the political right who resent, to varying degrees of intensity, a lockdown that values human life over economic considerations. Yes, Owen love, don't take responsibility for the conspiracy theory that the right have all risen as one to have a go at Ferguson. You know, the man who assaulted British agriculture with his wildly exaggerated figures predicting apocalypse from the foot and mouth outbreak in the 90s, and some piddling little miscalculations about bird flu a few years later, and the fact that you have yourselves said you can't explain the figures you reached for this epidemic because it's worked on an 11-year-old formula which you don't remember, that you don't remember how it works anymore. Jones then asks, where is it? What public interest is there in revealing the identity of Ferguson's partner? Well, she's not his partner, given that she's not a public figure. Well, I'd say it was very important to know something about the woman for whom Ferguson was prepared to risk his entire career just for the sake of a couple of hours of nookie. So obviously he has a very serious, or at least a profound, attachment to her for the time being. Owen Jones continues. Let's see. I can't read all of this. The polls are clear. The public are overwhelmingly opposed to lifting lockdown, more so than any European country. Which polls? I'm very interested in which polls he's talking about. Would those be the polls perhaps who said that Labour were going to draw neck and neck with the Conservatives in the December election? I'd just like to know which polls they were, because all the people I've been talking to can't wait to get back to work and get the kids to school. He continues that the public are scared because the public have noticed the deaths of tens of thousands of their fellow citizens and drawn rational conclusions. Tens of thousands? That sounds like people falling over in the street, doesn't it? 31,000 people have died. Each one an individual tragedy, but 31,000 can be described as tens of thousands only in the most technical of terms. And a good deal of those, I have to say, happened because of government mismanagement of old people's homes. So that was one tranche of old people who died in one particular situation, and everybody knows that. It's not like, every second house in suburbia is a plague house. And there's something else Jones is ignoring. The virus isn't going to go away. We don't have a vaccine. Somewhere along the line, we are going to have to acquire herd immunity, or we are going to have to stay indoors until the vaccine turns up, which may be 2 years from now. The lockdown isn't going to help the herd immunity. And now that the NHS has more or less got its act together, we have to accept the inevitable. For sure, certain people have to be excused work. I'd say anyone over 60 should remain at least sort of isolated. But the rest of the country has to get back. It's not lives or the economy. It's lives or lives, because that's what the economy is. The only thing a further lockdown will do is prolong the agony. And if we listen to the likes of Owen Jones, that agony is going to be particularly agonising. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share, because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons, because occasionally they reset. Till next time.